This represents discipline. And this represents strength.
Have you ever wanted to play Sapphire and Steel, but everyone told you not to because it was too hard to play, or the deck just loses to Sapphire, Ruby, or now in set 5 to Daisy? Well, I'm here to tell you that Sapphire and Steel is still one of the best decks in the format, and I'll be showcasing a deck guide and also a deck building guide on how Sapphire and Steel should be played. I will be going over all the core packages you want in your Sapphire and Steel deck and all the cards you should consider when you're building it. And that's going to be all the way from your early, mid, late game strategies as well as your draw engines and your removal packages. This should just be a basic start on how to play Sapphire and Steel. And if you're a new player, I'll be showcasing this deck list right here in Dreamborn. It's going to be a pretty simple list if you want to get started. Also budget friendly, but for the most part, all the cards in there should be pretty easy to learn the deck. And if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and click that sub button. Let's get this guide started. Now, this is going to be the most important card in the deck, and that's going to be a Whole New World. Why is Whole New World so broken, and why is it so important? Being able to draw 7 cards and continuing ramping your inkwell and putting stuff on the board is just insane. There's going to be some matches where you don't need Whole New World, so you can always ink it and then rely on Hiram and other search cards in your deck to let you keep drawing. But this card is just insane, and it's what makes Sapphire and Steel one of the best decks in the format. So the most important core package in all Sapphire and Steel decks is going to be the Hiram item package. So pretty much your Fortisphere and Popsicle are going to be able to draw 1 card when you play it, and then Hiram allows you to draw 2 cards on play, and then when he quests you get to draw another 2 cards. This is going to be the most important package, and you want to have this core in every Sapphire Steel deck that you play, just because this is going to be the best draw engine you have in the deck, and being able to draw and keep the gas going for the blue steel deck is the most important thing to compete and catch up to any other deck that you're playing. So overall, you're always going to have 4 Popsicles, 4 Fortispheres, and 4 Hirams. There's an argument to be made if you want to cut a Fortisphere, just one, as a tech slot for anything else you want to add. But for the most part, these cards right here are going to be your main engine, and you want to be playing this in every Sapphire Steel version of deck that you play. For the early game package, you're gonna want to consist of any of these cards right here, whether that be Captain Hook, Smee, Grandma Tala, or Fire the Cannons. Now, in every Sapphire and Steel deck, Mr. Smee is played as a 4 of, and for the most part, a lot of people tend to not play Captain Hook or Grandma Tala. Now, personally, all of these cards here are important just because you want to be able to fight the board early on. You have a lot of aggressive decks, and if you lose control of the board early, you're going to get behind in lore and lose the game. Captain Hook and Smee do pair very well with each other, causing Smee not to lose any health if you have another captain on board, which is going to be Captain Hook. Captain Hook will be a very good turn 1 play just in case you don't have a popsicle or an item. And following up with Captain Hook, Smee is also, or not also, the best card to play on turn 2 as far as fighting the board. And then depending on your build, you can get Grandma Tala out on turn 3, turn 4, and her being a 3/3 can fight the board pretty well, and her being able to search the top 2 cards of your deck is also a good bonus. Now, Fire the Cannons is probably the best turn 1 play that you can have to stop shift lines. So for example, if you're going against Amber Steel, you can destroy their queen if you're on the draw, or you can destroy their Robin Hood. Same thing against Emerald Steel, you can kill any Morphs or any Robin Hoods. And not only that, but if you're going against any aggro matches that have any 2 questers and you don't open the hook, and if you're on the draw, you don't want to fall behind because you won't be able to get something on board until turn 2, and by then you'll fall behind in lore. So the Fire the Cannon is very, very strong to stop that. And the most important thing about this card is to stop evasives. So we have cards like Diablo in the meta that cannot be attacked unless you have evasive, and Sapphire Steel decks do not play evasive cards. So Fire the Cannons is a very strong early game card if you want to stop any evasives, any aggros, and any shift lines play. These cards you can pick on what you want to run in your build. So if you want to just think of board control, have these cards in mind. You're always going to play 4 Mr. Smees, and then the combination of these cards is what you want to decide on what you want to play. If you want to go just for early aggro, then play all these cards. If you can't afford one slot, then you can go ahead and just play this package, but I definitely recommend just testing it out and seeing how you like to have your deck built to fight the early game. Now we'll be going over the ramp core package of the deck. So in every deck, you're always going to play Fishbone Quill. In every Sapphire and Steel deck, this will always be a 4 of, just because you can ink any card in your hand, and when you ink that card, you can use that ink that same turn. So for example, if you're playing this on turn 3, you can ink a card, and you can play a Fire the Cannons, a Captain Hook, or a Popsicle. So super strong card, and you always want to run 4 of these, just because Sapphire Steel, how it is a deck that you want to accelerate your ink, it's the best card to do it. Now, the second ramp card, you always want to have 2 ramp options in your Sapphire and Steel deck. So it's going to be a combination of Fishbone Quill, and if you want to have Detective Mickey, 1 Jump Ahead, or Tipo. So let's go over each of these 3 cards right here real quick. So 1 Jump Ahead being a 2 cost, uninkable. It's a song though, so you can sing it with the character that costs 2 or more. And this card lets you exert and ink the top card of your deck. Same thing with Mickey Mouse, but Mickey Mouse is a 3 drop, and it also exerts the top card of your deck. So these 2 cards here, the good thing about them is they ink off the top of your deck, so you're not negging cards in your hand. The downside is though is they're uninkable compared to Tipo, which is a new card we got this set, and Tipo lets you ink a card from your hand. And you want to compare these 3 cards when you're building your Sapphire and Steel deck. It's pretty simple. If you want to manage your uninkable count, I recommend playing Tipo, just because having this card as an inkable allows you to play other strong cards that are uninkables. 1 Jump Ahead is very strong just because you can sing it. So for example, if you're going against an aggro matchup, you can play Mr. Smee on turn 2 and then still be able to accelerate your ink the next turn just by singing 1 Jump Ahead. Again, the downside is though, it is uninkable. So if you do draw this card late game and you really need ink, I mean, sure, you can play it to gain ink, but depending on your hand, you might just want to ink something in your hand and not waste the 2 ink to play it. So me personally, I do like Tipo just because, again, he's inkable. He can ink any dead card. But when you're building your Sapphire and Steel deck, this is going to be your ramp choices. You're always going to play 4 Fishbone Quills, and then you decide on the other 4 cards that you want to play. Do you prefer having a body just to fight the board control, so you have Mickey or Tipo? Or if you want to go super fast and play Smee and worry about ramping later, then 1 Jump Ahead might be your pick. The next package of the deck is going to be your mid-game characters that you want to have on the board. So after you fought the board early on, or gotten some draws, or inked, and able to ramp faster than your opponent, by turn 4 or 5, you're able to play a 5 or 6 cost ink character. Now, the characters that are usually in every Sapphire and Steel deck are going to be Cogsworth, Tinkerbell, and so far I have seen Champo being implemented, so I'm going to go ahead and add that in. Cogsworth is going to be the best 5 drop that you can have, just because Cogsworth has ward itself. So this card being able to not be targeted and allows you to sing a whole new world the following turn is just very strong. If you want to fight the board and Cogsworth isn't going to help you do that since he's only a 2/5, then your best option would be playing Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell being a 6 drop, 4/5 stats, and can deal 1 damage to everything on the board, and then when it kills a character, it can deal an additional 2 damage to something else. This card's the best card to fight the board mid-game. So if you already have Captain Hook, Smee on board, and you play Tinkerbell, you pretty much have the whole board on lock. And then Champo, the reason why I like Champo and why, again, I implemented him is because this last set and this current set, set 5, we're seeing a lot of board fight early in the game. So him being a bodyguard and having a 4/7 stat line is super strong. He can protect your board, can protect your Smee and Captain Hooks, or protect your Cogsworth, Tinkerbell, and allows you to quest. And in the matchups where, for example, Maui is being played, so in any Ruby deck, Champo can actually survive that. So Champo being able to survive, protect your board, also being a very good singer, because when you sing a whole new world, you want your singers to live, and he'd be the best card to do it just because of his defense. Now, these cards are very good in different matchups. So again, for example, against Amber Steel, which is a very popular deck, all these cards are super strong against Amber Steel. If you're going against anything that's Ruby, again, Tinkerbell lets you fight the board control against Ruby, or even against Amethyst. Amethyst has a lot of the Merlin package and the Madam Mims. So pretty much against anything aggro or early on, Tinkerbell will do that. and then Cogsworth gives you that resist to your whole board. So if you're fighting against anything that's steel, your whole board is protected. So for the mid game, I definitely would always recommend playing these cards. Tinkerbell and Cogsworth are usually always a 4 of on each one. There's an argument to be made where you can play 3 on either or. Me personally, I like the 4/4. And then Champo is going to be your tech slot, or again, me personally, I think he is a very good add-in. And here you can play him at 1 or 2, but for the most part, for your mid game, these cards are going to help you to control the board, and these are very good singers when you do sing A Whole New World. When you're fighting the board, and just in case your opponent is able to destroy your characters, well, how else are you going to fight the board back? And that's going to be with action cards. So your action cards that are going to be consisted of Smash, Along Came Zeus, Let It Go, and Grab Your Swords. Now, these cards are a combination of however you like to play it. Grab Your Swords is a card that's been playing in Sapphire and Steel pretty much since the beginning of the game, so this card will always be in the deck. You can get away with 2, 3, or 4. That's just going to be preference, but if you have a problem against aggro, or just in general wanting to board wipe your opponent, when you pair this card with Tinkerbell, you can do 3 damage to the whole board. So Grab Your Swords is going to be an auto mandatory add-in, and again, you can test between 2 to 4 and see how you like that card. Let It Go is another card that I think is really strong and should be in every Sapphire and Steel deck, just because it doesn't care on how much stats your opponent's characters have. You just automatically send that card to the Inkwell. So cards like Tamatoa, Sisu, Maleficent Dragon, Ariel, the steel one that has, I believe, stats 3/8, or Big Cinderella, pretty much anything that's hard to get rid of or has resist, Let It Go will be able to just get rid of that. And then you have Along Came Zeus. Along Came Zeus is very strong just because it kills anything with 5 life or less, and it could also be sung with the character of 4 ink or more. So you can pair this card with Hiram, Grandma Tala, or any of your 5 and up cost characters and sing it, and can pretty much kill anything on the board, and it also deals damage to locations. And then last but not least, you have Smash. Smash did see play a lot of the early sets. I think it's still a very strong card. Just depends on your local meta or the decks that you're facing against. Being able to destroy something with 3 life is very strong. These cards you're going to want to have, because when you're fighting the boards and you want to be able to sing, these cards can pretty much just answer anything that you're facing against. Now, I think this is the most important part of the Sapphire deck, just because Sapphire and Steel is a deck that doesn't really draw on its own outside of Hiram. So you have to make sure you have cards in your deck that allow you to keep drawing and not fall behind, because the moment you stop seeing A Whole New World or you don't see your key cards, you're going to lose the game. And this is what I like to call your search or digging package. Now, either of these cards are going to be good to implement in your deck, and let's just go over it real quick. You have Beast, that can draw a card each turn if it has no damage on him. Gaston lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you have Vision of the Future, which lets you look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Now, the main reason why I think this package is very important compared to all the other cards in your deck is because, again, you want to find a whole new world as fast as you can, and you usually want a whole new world in all your matchups. Maybe not against Ruby Sapphire, but depending on your board and depending on how much you've ramped early, and if you're able to stop their board, then yes, you want a whole new world consistently as fast as possible. Now, which cards are going to be the best ones to play? Well, it just depends, right? If you play Beast, you're going to have to wait a turn to draw a card. But if he does not get answered, you can draw a card every single turn. And his other effect, if he has damage, he becomes an attacker for 7. So that's a pretty good. But for the most part, we just want to focus on the drawing aspect of it. And then you have Gaston. Again, lets you look at the top 3. So that lets you help you find your whole new world, or a Hiram, or a Popsicle to just keep on drawing. And the same thing with the Vision of the Future, right? You want to find your whole new world, or not just Whole New World, but with all these cards, you want to be able to find your removal or find the cards that you need in certain situations. Now we're going to go over our location removal package, and that's going to consist of either Simba, Hideaway, or Cusco. The reason why you want to have cards in your deck that can remove locations is because really your early game can be strong, right, with Captain Hook or Smee, but just in case you don't see those cards early and you focus more on ramping, you're going to miss having characters on board early. And if your opponent plays locations back to back, or even late game and crucial parts, if you're not able to answer those locations, your opponent's going to sneak away with a lot of lore. So I feel like Sapphire Steel has to have some type of location removal and instantly, because we're focusing on other things in the deck and we don't want to lose just because our opponent plays a castle or a make manor or anything like that. So the best cards for that, again, are going to be either of these cards. You have Simba here that lets you banish any location or item. And the difference between Hideaway and Cusco is going to be they also do the same thing, but they banish your opponent's item or location into their inkwell. So you're going to ramp your opponent. Either of these cards are good for what they do. They are a direct response. Cusco and Simba are going to be singers, so if you want to play something on curve and you want to be able to sing a whole new world after, then these cards are very strong. If you're focusing more on going wide and you don't want to spend too much ink on removing a location, then Hideaway might be the best option, right? It only costs 2 ink. You can test, I do recommend testing all these cards and seeing which one you like personally. You might not want to play Hideaway or Cusco if you're going against Ruby Amethyst or Ruby Sapphire, right? Because you don't want to ramp your opponent. But then if you think about being able to send their Lucky Dime to their own inkwell and they cannot recur it with Tamatoa, this is specifically for the Mirror Match or Ruby Sapphire, then this might be your best answer. But if you just want to play something on curve and get rid of that location and item with having no negative effect, then Simba would be your best option. So for example, Simba in the Ruby Sapphire, you can get rid of Ice Blocks, Fish Bones, and it feels good, right? You're not trading a six drop for a 3/1 cost item and wrapping your opponent as well. But then again, Cusco quest for 2, right? And then if you look at Hideaway, well, Hideaway is not a singer, it's not a body, and it doesn't gain you lore. So either of these cards are going to be your location. I recommend trying them all out, but you need at least two copies of whichever of these cards, or you can even do one of each if you like. But definitely need at least 2 cards or more, 2 to 3 to get rid of locations or items. Every Sapphire and Steel deck needs to have its win condition, or pretty much in any deck that you play, you need to have a win condition. And what's the win condition in Sapphire Steel? Well, for the most part, it's always going to be Lucky Dime. Now, what Lucky Dime does is when you play it, it costs 7 ink. It costs 2 ink to activate its effect. So if you want to play it and activate an effect, it in total is going to cost 9 ink. You can choose one of your characters and gain lore equal to that character's lore, pretty much. So why is that important? So we're trying to control the board, trying to ramp, we're trying to fight back, do so many things, search and draw, to where really at the end of the game, we need to close it out fast, right? Because it takes so much time. Not that it takes too much time, but it's set up to where we don't want to fall behind in lore. And we don't want to get to that point where we have to respond to our opponent's characters every turn just so we don't lose the game. And Lucky Dime and its package is what's going to help us close out the game. So this is going to be your win condition and your end game cards. So you always want to have at least 2 copies or 1 copy of Lucky Dime, and then you want to have your checkmate cards, which are going to be either of these right here. Now, Lucky Dime shines the most when you're pairing it, again, with a character that gains you a lot of lore. So we'll go, for example, on these cards right here. You have Ariel that has Ward, and if you have more items than your opponent does, she quests for 5. You have Belle. If you have 10 or more ink, she quests for 5. Tamatoa, for each item you have in play, he gains a lore. And then you have Sheriff of Nottingham. Big Body, quest for 4, with the stats of 5/9, and he's able to come out for 1 cost less for each item you have in play. You can get him out pretty much just as fast as any of these other characters, and not only is he hard to deal with, but he has big lore stats. Now, if we go back to these other cards, again, you have Tamatoa. He's a 5/8, so super hard to get rid of, needs direct removal. Belle being the weakest of them all, super killable target, but the thing with Belle is that you're able to bring her out faster than all these other characters, and then her second effect is you can ink the turn you play her. And you have Ariel. Ariel has Ward, so in the matchups against Ruby Sapphire, Ruby Amethyst, where they cannot answer her directly other than cards with Be Prepared, she's super strong in those matchups. Either of these cards, for the most part, can gain you 4 lore or more. For the most part, Ariel and Belle will always get you 5 lore, but they do have conditions, right? So you need to make sure you have that 10 ink, and then Ariel, you need to make sure you have more items than your opponent. Tamatoa, just being a big body, really relies on how many items you played early on. And then Sheriff of Nottingham, same thing, relies on how many items you played on. But either of these cards, when you play with Dime, you're going to catch up to your opponent fast. Now, which cards are going to be the best to play? Honestly, that's up to you. I can tell you that Ariel and Tamatoa are super strong against Ruby Sapphire, Ruby Amethyst, just because they need direct removal, and if they're not answered, your opponent's going to lose the game. Sheriff of Nottingham is just a strong card overall in any matchup. Him being a big body, and he can also fight the board consistently. Super strong target. And then you have Bell being the cheapest target out of all of them. For the most part, the thing about Bell is, depending on how much ink you have late game, you can actually dime and play Bell and activate Dime's effect the same turn. So if you're trying to close out the game fast and more consistently with less ink, then this might be your option. This is going to be the tech choices that you have available to you when you're building your Sapphire and Steel deck that I think are good in this meta. The reason why I consider these cards tech choices is because they're not mandatory add-ins. Maybe outside of Pete. Pete is definitely a mandatory add-in of 1 to 3 copies, but these cards are all personal tech choices. So we're going to start off with the best card, which is going to be Pete. Pete allows your opponent to not play any action cards. So that means you stop pretty much anything that's straight up removal, that's not characters, and that can help you protect your board and win the game. You have Cruella de Vil that lets you fight off any evasive characters. McManor is a location with the stats of 9 defense and it gains 2 lore. So if you put 1 or 2 of these out on the board while having a board full of characters, your opponent just can't answer it all. And then you have Arthur and Hades. Arthur and Hades are going to be 2 big bodies. Hades lets you directly remove something on board. Pretty much same effect as Let It Go. Arthur can help you fight the board with your other characters. So Arthur plus Tinkerbell can pretty much control your whole opponent's board. Now we're going to go over what cards you want to see in your opening hand. This is on the play or on the draw and pretty much against any matchup to be honest with you. So we'll start off with our early first two turn plays, and that's going to be your Popsicle, Fire the Cannons, Captain Hook, or Mr. Smee. So you always want to see either a Popsicle, just to have something consistent and to draw a card, and it's an inkable. And then Fire the Cannons is pretty much really good against anything, right? You don't know what you're going against if you're doing a blind mulligan. And opening Fire the Cannons is a very strong choice, just because for the most part, you're able to answer any 1-drop that does not have 3 defense or more. And then again, Captain Hook and Mr. Smee are going to help you fight the board early on. The most important mulligan card that you want to see is going to be a ramp card. So whichever card allows you to gain additional ink, you want to see that card. Because that's the whole point of Sapphire and Steel, right? Is to gain more ink than your opponent and control the board. You want to have a follow-up turn after you ramp. So either a Hiram or a Tala. Again, these cards are going to help you keep drawing cards, and depending on which one you have is just crucial for your matchup. So if you're going against anything that's a discard, you want to go for Hiram, and if you're going against anything that you want to fight the board, then Tala might be your best pick. So you want to make sure you open up with a card that allows you to draw. Cogsworth lets you give resist to your other character, so if you opened up with Captain Hook or Mr. Smee, they can keep fighting the board. Tinkerbell allows you to fight the aggro matchups or anything that's fighting the board with you. And then Chempo, just being a thick body, allowing you to sing a whole new world and protect your board, is just super strong. So again, in your opening hand, you want to see a combination of any of these cards right here. Tinkerbell, Chempo, and then again, Cogsworth is just solid overall into all matchups. These cards are going to be the cards that you always want to play when you do sing a whole new world. Opening hand, you want to see a combination of any of these cards right here, and that will help you start up the game and should allow you to get to that mid and late game to win the match against your opponent. Now, which cards are going to be the most important if I had to rank them? It's either going to be a combination of Fire the Cannons and Popsicle and Mr. Smee, and definitely Fishbone Quill. And I'd have to get either one of these singers right here. And then, depending on how greedy you want to be, you can throw in a Tala or a Hiram. But for the most part, the most important cards are going to be either of these here at the top row, and you can pretty much mulligan everything else away. If you're going against aggro or a deck, again, that you know you're going to fight the board, then Tinkerbell, Chempo would definitely be the stronger pick. In conclusion, I think Sapphire and Steel is still one of the best decks in the format. The fact of how explosive this toolbox deck can be and all the different lines of plays that you have all the way from defense and offense is just insane. You can really have a really strong early game with having board control with your low ground characters, and then shift to the mid game when you have enough ink and start being explosive with high cost characters and removal. And then you close out the game with either of your win conditions from Ariel, Tamatoa, and then you always have Lucky Dime as your backup.